Okay, it says it's streaming live. I'll just wait 5 seconds because sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lita Mae Button. This is the Dildo Dilemma, Humor in the Face of Trauma podcast. I want you to imagine being paralyzed by fear because each step you've taken forwards up to this point was blocked by the obstacles that live inside of you. Doubt, insecurities, feelings of abandonment. That was me from the age of 16 to 22. Then bam, life sucker punched me. I became a single parent to my son with a lifelong and at times life-threatening blood disorder called hemophilia B. And I knew that I needed to deal with those obstacles to be strong and help him grow into a productive and well-adjusted adult. So I began boxing competitively through one punch, one competition, and overcoming one fear at a time. I did it! I learned how to punch back at life, absorbing the shock of life's blows and channeling those blows into empowering myself by tackling those fears in the ring. It rippled out into my everyday life, giving me the confidence to live life on my own terms, be the number one role model of my why for my son. That was my why for my son, and have the confidence to protect us if the need should arise. This resulted in me winning the 2013 Golden Gloves Canadian Light Welterweight Championship, and I began coaching full-time in 2015. And in 2017, I was voted Fab Female Health and Wellness Entrepreneur of the Year in Greater Toronto Area. So as a motivational speaker and boxing coach, I do what I do because I know the end result when a woman is empowered on every level of her being through health, movement, and boxing. Because when a woman takes back and steps into her power from the inside out, this has a rippling effect that the world needs to heal. In fact, it's good for the world economy too. I just came across a statistic this week, which is really empowering, because when a woman empowers herself, it can add up to $28 trillion to our world economy in 2025. Trillion. So when we focus on empowering women, it's just good business and good economy. And especially when a woman empowers herself first and foremost, she shows and nurtures onto and into others what is possible. It teaches us how to treat each other with love, kindness, and compassion. And the world needs this more than ever, especially when it comes to ending violence against women. So if you're joining and watching this today, it's why I've started this podcast and movement called Dildo Dilemma, Humor in the Face of Trauma, which is about bringing awareness, advocacy, and action taking using the power of stories, humor, and boxing to help eliminate violence against women in Newfoundland and worldwide. And in case you're wondering why Newfoundland, well, here are two reasons. First, it's my home and it's my family's home. And I recently found out in the past few months that violence against women statistically is higher here in Newfoundland than the rest of Canada, with 1 in 2 women over the age of 15 experiencing a form of stalking or violence in their lifetime. So I want to help make lasting changes for my family now and my grandkids in the future, because my son really doesn't want to leave the island. So it's most important when we want to make changes to focus on what's happening inside and closest around us first and foremost. Then second, Newfoundland is just plain awesome. If you're watching and you've never been to Newfoundland, I suggest you put it on your list to come visit, because it's Canada's most eastern province. It's an island of just over the home to the island. It's an island to the home of just over 500,000 people. We have our own time zone, and we have the names of towns like Blow Me Down and Dildo. However, there's an imposter since 2019 by the name of Jimmy Kimmel, who's claimed himself as the honorary mayor of our town of Dildo. Yet not once has he stepped into the town of Dildo or even onto the island of Newfoundland for that matter. We could call it a real dildo dilemma. So it's time for a woman to lead and help make changes by nurturing instead of demanding. Hashtag Lita Mae Button. hashtag Mayor of Dildo, hashtag Dildo Dilemma, hashtag nurture. So today's special guest is Stephanie Howlett. Stephanie is a fearless rainbow warrior and CEO of Diversity Newfoundland. She's launched this fabulous company in 2020 and was ready to sprinkle glitter and shake up the world of diversity and inclusion. With her podcast, Diversity Newfoundland, Be the Change, she serves up truth bombs and fun insights on being an ally, accomplice, and change maker. When she's not coaching CEOs to find their inner unicorns, Stephanie's breaking down barriers and creating awesome workplaces where everyone can be their true, authentic selves. Plus, she is a proud fur mama who loves to strut down nature trails with her wife, ruling the queerdom with her pup by her side. And yes, Queen, thank you so much and welcome here today to Dildo Dilemma Humor in the Face of Trauma podcast. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Absolutely. It's certainly my pleasure to be on board and have this live stream. Thank you for having me. It's awesome.
I see that where you are located, the sun is shining on you as well.
It is, and it's a sunshine day, and we don't get many of those here in the Rock of Newfoundland and Labrador, so I'm quite grateful for that. Let it in.
I know, right? It's hard to sit still. I find it's hard to sit still on days. So can you please let us know what your background is and why you said yes to coming on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little intro of how we met. So we would have met a few weeks ago back at Limitless. I guess a stage for people to get up and have a conversation about, how fabulous they are, meant for women oriented folks. And I met you there, and I met your goat. And I heard your fantastic story, by the way. And it resonated with me because I've spent a lifetime. I'm a social worker. I have a master's degree in social work. And when I started off early in my career, it was in rural outports. And it was a humble beginnings. It was one of those that I'm really proud of, getting to know the people that I did. And some of the clients that I've had, they're etched in my memory forever. I was in child protection. I dealt with a lot of women who were involved in the domestic violence. And it was, I can still see the children's faces. When you're in this work, you see it, you live it, you experience sometimes trauma yourself. And it's just one of those impactful things that I think that, we all have a role in playing and helping with domestic violence. And that's a startling statistic. It's 1 in 2. So it's something that I think we all need to have conversations about and all really need to be passionate about. Like, how do we end gender-based violence and what does that look like?
Thank you for sharing your experience with social work and actually like grassroots being involved with it. So is there any kind of specific stories or circumstances that stand out in your mind when you were working with social work and
Yeah,
trauma?
I guess I can't get into specifics, but I will say like a few generalities. So when I worked with child protection, we were on call frequently nighttime, for instance, as well as then you get up in the morning and you go to work and you do your daytime thing. So when you receive phone calls in the middle of the night when you're on call from women all over the region saying that, help me find a way out. He's finally passed out and I have the kids here and he's just beaten me up and I need to leave. Help me leave. Right. Like like the seriousness of all situations or being called out of bed. Similarly, early morning hours and showing up with the police on someone's doorstep because of domestic violence. The women being beaten up, the kids crying and screaming. Not a good situation when you show up with police. You show up yourself as well. And, having to deal with, all those different things, having to help, having to find, relocation within the middle of the night, having to, help children, explain to them what's going on. Young people like that should never have to, go through seeing, domestic violence, partner-based violence in their lives. So, really heavy things early in a career and, heavy for people that are experiencing them and heavy for children who have lived up or have grown up in lives that are, surrounded by different sorts of, abuses, violence, alcoholism, and all those sorts of things. So to me, being able to humbly play a part in, small things like that early on in my career has certainly shaped me as a person who I am.
Oh, for sure. And make you like really give you a deep perspective in terms of
Yeah.
all the levels of things that people deal with. And having worked in mental health, it helps you communicate and connect and have an empathy and compassion and an understanding that everyone has a journey and everyone is walking their ways in life in a different way. And we have no, we'll always have preconceived judgments. I think that's just part of being a human being. But the more you're exposed to these things, the more you understand, the more you have these conversations, the more you keep an open mind, the more you can express compassion and non-judgment and be able to step into the person's shoes. So um, that's like I know the point of what you've experienced there in your career wise. Uh,
But just to add to that, if you don't mind,
yeah.
that, like people have a preconceived notion that it just happens to low income families. It doesn't. I've been in the most beautiful of homes. I've been in homes that were poverty stricken. I've been into middle class homes, and this happens across all spectrums so that people know, because sometimes people are saying, well, that wouldn't happen to me because we have money. You know what? You might have money today, but you may not have money tomorrow. Or there might be drugs or alcohol and all sorts of things happen, trauma in people's lives, mental health difficulties, because 1 in 3 of us will have mental health issues throughout our lifetime. So just keeping those things in mind, it could be you tomorrow, or it could be your son or daughter or whomever in your life go through these challenging times. So it is truly about empathy and keeping that open mind.
Yeah, yeah. So you said in terms of it's very heavy. Did you have like specific ways that helped you cope?
So I had a really great teammates. So we had a really great group that worked when I was in child protection in a few different locations in our province. And, we helped each other a lot as teammates. And um, one of those things too is self-care, like knowing when, you need to exercise frequently. You need to get rid of that stress, healthy eating, exercise, see counselors, us ourselves when you're taking on trauma. I
Yeah.
always thought as a social worker, it's just like, no, I can deal with it. But you know what? We can't always deal with everything that we're going through because trauma impacts us as well. We're dealing with it, but we need to understand how it impacts us. If you wake up with night sweats, which I frequently did, if you wake up with night terrors, which I did as well, just because of all the different situations I dealt with, sometimes we ourselves need to see counselors. We need to seek help and, have that conversation about, how we do stress, how we decompartmentalize, how we're able to do the great work we're doing. And I know a lot of social workers that they've done it for a lifetime, which is truly amazing.
Yes.
They've helped people in crisis for lifetimes. For me, I had to step back and take on other roles and other positions because just, for me, I found it was heavy, like really heavy work. And for me as a person that I could no longer give my best self and to know when someone else needed to step in to help with that heavy work as well.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely understand that. And I always say, everything is energy. Like, Tesla said, if you want to think of the terms of the world, think in the terms of energy. And I'm gonna share a story here, two stories actually, because uh, one of the reasons that I started boxing was because of the situation I went through my son, but this isn't a story I normally typically share with everybody. But when he was about 6 months before he was diagnosed, he had these what we called funny bruises. And I don't know who to this day, I have an idea who, but I don't really overthink it. But I had CAS, Children's Aid Society, actually come to my door to investigate. But because I'd done nothing wrong, they closed the investigation in like 2 or 3 days. But it was one of the most scariest moments of my life, like what is happening here? But I give kudos because there's so many different types of situations that you social workers uh, have to deal with. Um, but in terms of energy and the heaviness of it, I noticed this when I took my placement at CAMH Hospital in Toronto before I started nursing full time. We were in different rooms for training, different meetings and stuff. Each room, they had like the original dial clocks. every room, none of the clocks times were the same. They were all off by a certain amount of time. And I just found that so interesting, and it always stuck out in my mind. And the more I started reading about energy and the power of intentions and our thoughts and that, and I said, oh, it makes a lot of sense because most people who are dealing with mental health issues are not very regulated with their energy, right? So I thought I would really, it's um, interesting. And so kudos to you for knowing yourself well enough to take care and really, it sounds like the organization that you work for had really good supports, because I found in a lot of nursing environments, it's not like that. You know, nurses will come together, women come together, collaborate, but it's not always really great at being proactive and giving you supports to deal with the things that frontline workers often have to deal with, which is trauma, right? Um, so throughout it all, and what you're doing now, what tools do you use with organizations to help educate and minimize and ideally eliminate violence and discrimination?
Yeah, that's an easy one, right? So like so you can't probably see it on my lapel. So I'm just gonna kind of move it up. So you would have saw me wear this in Fearless, and I didn't explain it at that time. So it is a moose hide, and I'm just gonna show you. So it's moose hide campaign. So it's
Okay.
moosehidecampaign.ca. So if you get into it, it's Indigenous community. So it's grass-based roots, Indigenous led for men and boys, and it's for all Canadians. And I'm just going to read what they have on the card. So we're standing up against violence towards women and children. Wearing this moose hide signifies your commitment, honor, respect to protect women and children in your life and to work together to end violence against women and children and all those along the gender continuum. So I've been spreading that word for a couple of years about Moose Hide campaign. And every
Okay.
time I usually go to an event, I wear it on my lapel. If I goes to a business meeting, I wear it as well, just because I think we all have a role to play. And a little bit of their backstory is the best of my understanding is that I guess one of the people that formed the Moose High campaign, he's part of the Indigenous community, a father. Him and his daughter were wondering what they could do to be part of the change. So what they did is the moose that they killed of the season, they tanned it, they cut it up in small pieces. And to date, they've after giving out over 5 million pieces of moose hide worldwide. Um,
Wow.
so which is pretty impactful. So I see a lot of people now wearing these,
Yeah.
signifying that to me, this signifies that, we're part of the plan. We're part of an action. Like this is an action going forward. And, historically, we haven't learned a lot about our Indigenous communities. Historically, we haven't treated them well. Um, and there's so much in history that is completely awful. And I think that we need to start really speaking up about our Indigenous communities. The things that we saw growing up. I'm hitting 50 this year. So right, hitting 50 hard. So it's just all those things. I think about my young career, my 25-year-old career, my 25-year-old me, like getting involved in doing removals. Some of those are indigenous, some of those weren't. Just, I just kind of ponder back upon the times of, you know, we need to move ahead. We need to create actions, and we need to really be working with communities, right? Not really, you know, letting indigenous communities and other communities let us know about, how we can work together. A
Yeah.
lot of times through colonialism, through the systems that we work with, it's not that hand in hand sort of relationship of partnering with one another. And I think that's where we need to be. We need to be partnering with all forms of communities, disability community, queer community, which is a 2S LGBTQ plus community, communities of disability, racialized backgrounds, just like all communities. And because, violence and gender-based violence happens in all communities. So certainly for me as a public speaker and with Diversity NL, I want to put the L in there for Newfoundland and Labrador, by the way, because I don't want to get hate from my friends from Labrador, because Diversity NL stands for Diversity NL's Newfoundland and Labrador. I got to put that out there. Um,
Okay.
so because it's all about inclusion.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right. So it's looking at like what we can do as individuals. I do a lot of talks about individually, like what can we do? We can amplify people's voices that aren't being heard in workplaces. We can um, really be empathetic. I mean, Brene Brown has some great videos on empathy. So the power of empathy, because a lot of times we're trying to fix things that are wrong or fix
Yeah.
things that go wrong with people instead of just saying, wow, that's really tough what you're going through. No, because, I can't quite understand um, different things that happen, but I can listen, I can be empathetic. I can be that listening ear or shoulder. And sometimes we just talk too much, to be honest. We don't
Yeah.
listen enough. We don't hear enough, right? So we're just talking just
Yeah.
because, right? So, but like, let's kind of, be more empathetic. Let's have conversations, and just listen in spaces. And the safest space I've ever been in was an Indigenous circle. I was invited to be a part of an Indigenous circle, and I walked in and I was terrified. Had insomnia the night before because I thought it was going to be me. I was the only person there that would have been white and that would have not have been through that culture. And I came and sat down, and the elder came, and she cupped my hand and said, "Welcome." And I'm like, wow. Like, and I just felt her presence and her energy. Elder Marjorie, shout out to you. You're a fantastic, amazing person. And so that was a moment that certainly changed my life. So in at that point, it would have been 21 years in social work, and I'm like, that was the most um, interesting, fascinating, safer space I've ever been in as a social worker. And think about it, it was for the most part, all Indigenous people there. And
Yeah.
here I am coming in as a social worker that has removed Indigenous kids, that has, I did my job, but it doesn't feel good being in that space, of having had done what I'd done. So those are all the things I was thinking about the night before, coming to that circle, and, providing a little bit of education on gender inclusive language. And I can tell you, I got more education that day and more out of that full inclusive day than no doubt what they ever got from me. So being a part of drumming and smudging and learning how to bead. By the way, I'm a terrible beader. I cut open my finger. Beads were going everywhere. It's such a hard thing to do. So like, just learning about traditions and all those beautiful things. I mean, to me, it's if we get some knowledge and get an opportunity, I say yes to things. And you asked me why I said yes, is because I say yes to things that I'm fearful of. Being
Yeah.
live, terrifying. So I
Yeah.
say yes more to things. Actually, there's very little things I say no to these days. It's yes. How can I do it? How can it be helpful? So
Amazing, amazing. If you ever want a little like lighthearted entertainment, if you've never seen it, one of the funniest movies I've seen is Yes Man. When a
no, haven't.
Jim Carrey solo wants, it just reminds me when I hear people say yes, yes, it things
Yeah.
reminds me of that movie. So, uh, thank you for sharing like the power of the circle and inclusivity, and safe spaces for people is very, I think, I don't want to say underrated, but you mentioned about we talk too much, and
Mm,
it's just as a coach and as things that I say, I love like little quirk or little like taglines or things that you hear, you pick up, like Brene Brown, she says clear is kind. I always remember
mm.
that. Try to be as clear as possible when you're communicating. Um, and I remember reading or somebody saying, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
100%.
For twice
Mm,
listening. But
yeah.
as a coach, it's important to meet people. For me, it's important to me as a coach to meet people where they are at. And by collaborating and working with different communities and different diversities, we're meeting each other at the spaces that we're at, and how can we support each other. And it's the beautiful, it's the change that we need to make in this world, right? Instead of being like, you did this wrong and you did that wrong and
Hmm.
you need to change this and you need to change that. Well, it's where's like, these are your strengths, how can I support you in your strengths, and these are my strengths, how can you support me in my strengths, and how can we work together to make it a better place. But most importantly, the action taking, to make change. Uh, it's great to talk, which is absolutely awesome, but we learn best by doing in this world. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm always promoting.
And
Uh,
one of those biggest things, and you'll agree with this, I'm sure, is showing up for community, showing up for people, showing up in spaces is not because you work with whoever that you show up, is because you're interested. Like, we're showing up to support community. mean, that's the biggest thing. People will say, well, why are you doing that? Or why are you going there? It's because I'm showing up.
Yeah.
Shoot, if you don't show up, what is it you're doing? Like, what do you believe in, right? Like, if we don't show up, and take part of spaces, and help partner and create, I think that's the opportunity that we're missing. We're siloed. We're so siloed in the work that we're doing that we're not showing up. And it's like, well, it's because someone's encroaching on our territory or on our space, or we feel like they're trying to take away our work or business. But like, I think if we partner together, I mean, it's such a more enriching experience, to get to know, other groups, other communities, and other spaces.
Yeah. And I think the majority of women do this naturally because
Hmm.
it's in our DNA to
Yeah.
nurture and care and collaborate together. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a dildo dilemma educational break here before we move into the last couple questions because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Uh, so the town of Dildo's name origin has been debated throughout the years. So some believe the name comes from a term used or in early maritime slang for a type of tool used on ships, while others argue that it's derived from an old British word for a kind of rod or spear. It's also suggested that the name might have originated from the Portuguese word dildo, a type of fish tool used by sailors. Yet since I've moved here full time in 2020, the most common thing that I keep hearing is it's the dildo that is on the dories that are the rings that fasten in the oars for rowing. So that's the one I keep coming back to the most and that I share on educating with people. But in terms of the adult toy, in prehistoric times, the history of the adult dildo in Rome was referenced to the use of a phallic-shaped objects, although the broader cultural attitudes at that time around sexuality were more focused on male dominance and the subjugation of women, which is reflected in how these objects were used and perceived. So that's a little bit of history. Now back to Stephanie. Do you feel that the current workplace systems are set up to contribute to harassment and discrimination in the workplace?
That's a great question. I've worked with over 75 organizations, I guess, in the past 5 years. And I think that, HR people are trying to understand, I think, diversity and inclusion, trying to understand harassment, and there's policies there. Of course, I mean, like any workplace I've ever been in or talked to, I've seen their workplace policies, their harassment discrimination policies. I just wonder if we have the right mechanisms for feedback in those
Mm,
organizations that let's think about it. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert at heart and never ever thought I'd do public speaking for a living. However, having said that, many introverts probably wouldn't. Yet, if you're an introvert in an organization, and if the thought is that you have to speak up in order to say that you're being harassed or bullied, chances are you're not going to do that if you verbally have to do that. So I wonder if organizations have the right feedback loops and mechanisms in place so that introverts or anyone who don't feel safe that they're able to actually, action that before something becomes worse. Or worse yet, if it's, a person in authority, how do you have that conversation with someone? How do you put in that feedback? How does that work? So these are some of the conversations I do have with organizations of, maybe we need to be looking at, how do we do this anonymously, either through a survey, either through, let's go old fashioned, put it in a box, comments, or, it could be really anything. But, it could be like through a Slack channel, a messenger, anonymously. There's different systems set up so that people can give feedback. And, really, it's the leadership are the ones that set the tone within organizations.
yeah.
So if the leaders aren't saying, we're not putting up with this bullshit here, we're not having, people put down people, we're not having people, run you over. We're not having people, use foul language. We're not having people, discriminate, use sexist, homophobic, racist. You keep on going with all those isms, that kind of language. So leadership has to set the tone. If they're not setting the tone, and pulling that line in the right direction, now we have issues. And sometimes leadership they feel that sometimes they're excluded from this. So if you're a leader and feel that you're excluded from this, not going down that line, now we have issues. So,
Yeah.
leaders take heed. Like, what are your actions? What is it you're saying? Do your actions and what you're saying, do they equate each other or do they not? Because people take and follow you, whatever you do, because your words and your actions truly matter within your organization. What is it you're doing? What change are you making? And I mean small pieces of change, checking in with people, connecting with people, being present, having conversations, right? Everything doesn't have to come from a performance review because, to be honest, what do you get out of performance reviews? Like, what do you truly get out of performance reviews, right? They're grueling for your managers. They're grueling for you to go through at the end of the day. If you do frequent check-ins with people, right? Take 5, 10 minutes, do that frequently. You're better off doing that because you're going to find out what's on the go. Be present, show up.
Yeah. And it makes people feel like they're cared for more as opposed to
Yeah.
this huge audacious audit. I say audit because when I was in
Yeah.
there down every six
Yeah.
months, and go through and and it's like, okay, but that's not it, being a coach now full time for the
Yeah.
last 10 years. The real change doesn't happen in that it happens in quick moments, just like you're saying, like on an everyday day-to-day basis. So when leaders show that they care, it helps to create a rippling effect because not
Hmm.
everybody's there for a paycheck. I mean, money's
Yeah.
great, we all need it, but that's not really what motivates most people on a day.
100%.
So
Yeah. I mean, they truly want to have their voices heard. They want to feel that they did a good day's work, most people, and they want to have camaraderie, right? They do truly want to connect in with coworkers. And if we can be honest, Newfoundland and Labrador is not always as welcoming as what we think it is. And those great, fantastic commercials of people dancing along the seashores, they're amazing. I know we need to paint a picture for tourism, but
yeah,
like, let's accept people, please, all different generations, all different adversities, diversities, like gender diversities. Like, let's accept people for who they are, not
yeah.
trying to make them something else,
No,
right?
I'm sorry. I don't mean to, I'm not laughing at you or
No,
laugh.
I know why you're laughing. Yes.
It's taken like, this is such a different, because I lived in Toronto for 12
Yeah.
years, I'm here 5 years, and I've had a few circumstances and I still feel it. And I'm just like, I don't know if it's because many people here are not exposed to many different things,
Yeah.
my past history, but I was like, oh, like the I realized the women's statistic because I had something that happened when I was like, man, that would never happen in Toronto, like ever, like in the
No.
women's boxing world, like not nada. Like even though like it's always been a male dominated society, like male dominated sport, boxing, men have come like in the Toronto and Ontario and even across the mainland. Everybody's very, it's a family, no matter if you're a man or a woman,
Hmm.
you're always supporting one another. And if your athlete's doing really well, or you want to connect with another athlete, whereas here in the boxing world, I'm just like, I just don't even want to be a part of it because it just gives me a bad taste. And I don't like that. Like I've got enough life experience to understand that it is about being inclusive.
Yeah.
Um, and the sport of boxing has does that. But here in Newfoundland, I was like, oh man. Like, I'm like, and that's just one small representation. So thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie, because it's I don't like to ever speak ill because it's just everything. I believe everything is energy, but I'm it's and I'm happy that you kind of like pointed that out because I'm like, is it just me? Maybe it's just me,
No.
you
No,
know?
like, but I think that we need to call out things like that, because I think we think that we're all welcoming and we're not all the time. And why is that? Like I know that we've lived on a small island and for years and years we didn't have a lot of diversity, but right now we have a lot more diversity. We have people here from all different countries, all different spaces, languages, and honestly, they've come to make this their home. So why the heck aren't we welcoming? Like look inwards, people. Like we want people to be here, to be immigrants, refugees, to grow, to be a part of our beautiful island. They've picked here to come. And if we want them to stay, have beautiful kids, to be part of generations to come and part of our future, we need to be more opening and accepting to, all those different things, learning about backgrounds, learning about Ramadan, like happy Ramadan for those of you celebrating, right? Like let's learn about it. Let's learn about cultures, traditions, and all those things. Why not?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Curiosity. That's why
Yeah.
it's important to be curious about it. Uh, so what? three things would you say in your experience would help eliminate violence against women?
I think if we start raising children at a very young age, letting them know this is how we treat people in general. Because, violence can be against women, gender diverse, all different backgrounds, all different ages, and all those things, all different ways people identify, even within the community I'm in, that there's violence. So it's just, I think it's the way we educate, the way we talk to people, the way we talk to women. If we have daughters in our lives, if we have mothers in our lives, how are we talking to them? Are we being respectful? Like really we need to show that with people from a very young age is like how are we treating people with respect? Because sometimes respect has walked out the door, right? That nurturing way, that caring way. And I think it does happen from little ones, 3, 4 years old and all the ways up. Like anyone that's identifies as a man that's listening, how are you treating your wife, your daughter, your granddaughter? How do you want them to be treated? That's an even better question. So for future generations to come, do you want them to be suffering and through violence, through being called down, being called names? Of course you don't. So we need to be having these conversations, stepping up, really having them, I guess, as people. And I'm going to say as people in general, because violence can happen in any situation. Enter drugs, enter alcohol, enter bad temperaments, enter situational unemployment, enter like all these things have an impact on, creating bad situations, right? So our economy here has a chance, sometimes it goes up. And what happens then when it goes up is like people have more money to buy things. When it goes down, they have less money, but they're still buying the substances and all those things. And it's not right. Violence against anyone is not right. Animals, people, just looking at how we are as humans, be a better human, a better person.
And thank you for sharing that. Um, it comes back to, I think, the golden rule. What you're saying is what I hear is if we treat people how we want to be treated, and if we act like how we want to act in terms of when our children are watching us or the children's lives that we're involved in, understanding that if you were in their shoes, putting yourself in their shoes, sense of empathy, is this how I would want to hear or receive things? It's really, really important. As nurses, we're trained to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of empathy. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your stories here today, Stephanie. It's I feel like we could talk for another hour and a half or more. um, I'm going to end this podcast here today with a couple of fun Friday jokes. And I'll pause because maybe you'll come up with the answer, Stephanie. And if you don't have the answer, I'll definitely let you know the answer to the jokes. So, what's the difference between a dildo and a man at a bar? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone on the wall? The dildo doesn't need a drink to get things going. Okay. Why do women love their dildos? Especially all the single women out there. Most of my girlfriends are single. They always come through when things get rough. Wah, wah, wah. So thank you again for being our guest here today, Stephanie. I know I'm definitely going to look into, I wrote it down so I'll remember it, and then I'm going to review everything here too. The, what was that called?
Moose Hide campaign.
Moose Hide campaign. Yes. Because I'm going to the Fearless event in Ottawa. So I want to wear that when I'm there. So I think that's absolutely awesome. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn or www.diversitynl.com or Stephanie@diversitynl.com is my email.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you for everyone watching here today. Remember, movement is medicine, health is your wealth, and boxing saves lives. And you can visit my website at lidamaybutton.com and go to the tab More, where you can get your free 6-day Take Back Your Power Boxing Challenge. So happy Friday, everyone. And thank you again, Stephanie, for joining us here today.